Frank, you're muted.
Well, I shouldn't be muted. Thank you for
There
that.
you go.
Checking to see if every hair was in the right spot, and I kind of failed in that regard, but that's okay. I've had a head, which is a problem attributable to the fact that, I got to tell you, Aaron, we went out to have our weekly ribs at Chuck's.
Yeah.
They're a sponsor of the show. No, actually, they're not a sponsor of the show. At least they don't know that they're a sponsor of the show. I suppose I should mention it to them. What do you think? Should I mention it?
They're responsible for keeping you fueled, Frank. That's good enough for me.
That's good enough for me too. I like the deal. $15 ribs. It's a good deal. I'm really enjoying watching the hockey right now for one very important reason. The horrible nature of the officiating. It is and you know why it's bad. Before we start talking about the officiating is bad because they have not established what's a penalty or not. Because if they had, we wouldn't be seeing where there are more high sticking penalties right now as it stands before that game even started yesterday than there have been the whole playoffs last year. What does that tell you?
That nobody knows where the cutoff line is for high sticking.
It clearly is that. It is that. And I got to say, though, an interesting series, Montreal and Buffalo, two teams that have not been impactful, during the regular season up until this very year. They both look really good. And I got to say, I'm impressed with the way Buffalo's playing.
Oh, most assuredly. A lot of people didn't expect anything. I think they were also a little surprised about how well Buffalo played down the stretch after getting rid of the general manager. But that's one of those bump things that comes along with a little bit of constructive change. So nothing against Kevin Adams personally. I just don't think they really enjoyed playing under his rule.
Absolutely. Well, hey, look, when it comes to sports, the mental side of the game means a lot. The emotional side, which is attached to the mental side, can really affect how you play physically and are affected mentally. So, right now we've got a team in Montreal that's doing a masterful job of being very competitive. And we've got another team in Buffalo that's meeting the challenge. Here's the problem. There's a team called the Carolina Hurricanes that's sitting on the sidelines going, go ahead, beat the crap out of each other. We're okay with it. Just go ahead, keep beating the crap out of each other. We dig it. We think it's awesome.
Just all sitting there wondering when it's going to be their turn, but also grateful for the fact that they have 3 or 4 days off.
Absolutely. I have to say it's very exciting hockey. Aside from the ridicule that I'm throwing towards the officiating, the mesh in a glove makes the difference, because back in the day, if the whole glove was in the net, they wouldn't call it a goal because they couldn't see the puck. Now, in this case, they kind of saw the puck.
Yeah, and it's not going to take on the shape that some folks want in order for it to not be a goal. And I think it was also fairly obvious that it was a goal. Regardless of whether or not you could see the puck, you could tell where the glove was, and that's a little telling in and of itself.
The only argument is how they arrived at the conclusion, not the conclusion, right? Wouldn't that be fair?
Right? I'd like to think that they actually got it right.
Well, I think no one can argue the fact that the puck was behind, past the goal line. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. But many a puck has been behind the goal line that hasn't been called a goal in the past. So that's neither here or there. Speaking of the past, the Leafs have passed on bringing back Greg Berube, a Stanley Cup champion coach who was a part of changing the culture in the Maple Leaf locker room. The culture didn't change, but some of the players have since left, and it's looking more and more like, I don't know, is this a move that helps Austin Matthews stay, or does it give him a little extra push out the door? Which do you think?
Honestly, from being continuously badly employed or deployed, sorry, by Berube. I think this would be more consistent with Austin staying with the team. Given that he was one of the most prolific goal scorers, and yet his draws during the last period were actually technically in the defensive zone as opposed to in the offensive zone where he thrives. That's one of those things that kind of makes you question exactly what's going on in the coach's head. So, I mean, they went from Brewery didn't have a bad record with the Leafs. It was 84, 62, and 18. But they were 32, 36, and 14 in their last season. And they went from 108 points to 78 points. That's a 30-point loss, which is a huge swing. And that to me sounds like that's a coach that just completely lost the room, and no players even cared anymore.
I don't have to at all explain to you that I thought he lost the room back in November.
Oh, 100%. No, even earlier in the start of the season, it was fairly obvious that something wasn't quite right.
My measuring stick for coaching is too many men in the ice penalties. One in a matter of 6 months is one thing, but 3 in a matter of a week says another thing.
Yeah.
So he's gone now. The Leafs are not only we can question whether it's a rebuild or a retool or whatever, but it's definitely going to be a reset just by virtue of the fact that the coach now is different. How do I feel about the coach? I just don't think I don't think Berube had the room on, I don't think he had their attention. I really don't. I don't think that he had their attention. And the most important thing that I can say is that the team played very lackadaisical. Was there like a lackadaisical frame of mind, generally speaking, with the team? This is a guy who's taken the brunt of the responsibility on Matthews' ineffective season. They're saying that it was the style of play that the Leafs played led to Matthews' inability to get a lot of goals, to score as many as he scored in the past. I don't agree with that theory. I really believe that Matthews is not an offensive driver. He's an offensive finisher. And that's why he misses Marner so much. And there's no doubt about that. But the year before, he wasn't playing with Marner that much. He was playing with Domi, and Domi was setting him up. Things were working out. Who was the other guy on that line? I don't remember.
Just some random guy.
It wasn't McMahon. It wasn't McMahon. It wasn't him. But anyway, the bottom line here is that now the Leafs have got to start over with a new coach and bring in players that'll play for that coach. And can they put together a team that whatever coach they decide to bring, Aaron, which is the key here, players that can play for the coach that they have? Is there a symbiosis between the players and the coach? That is the challenge, the first challenge the Leafs have to come up with. And then it's about fine-tuning with the players that you have in the lineup. Can they play the coach's system?
Now, here's something interesting. From Sheika's press availability, he said that they didn't solicit feedback from players and coaching staff. The only things that John had heard about Craig were that they re-emphasized the type of person he is and how much they enjoyed being around him. Now, that's been his credibility as a player and as a coach, so that didn't weigh in at all. They felt that they had a thorough process. There will be a wide search, and like the decision wasn't made in a vacuum, But I think it's telling that they didn't speak to their own players about, a coach before letting him go. I'm pretty sure it was coming, and I'm pretty sure everybody saw it coming. But at the same time, it's like, well, what you doing here, boys?
Oh, we're talking some more about the fact that the Leaf organization does stuff that doesn't make total sense.
I believe the word is shambolic.
Okay, I'll go with that.
That's the word I think I'm looking for here.
I think I'm more concerned when it comes to the Maple Leafs that they have a clear path that they're on that is in the right direction, and I'm waiting. It's wait and see time for me, and I'm on the Matthews trade him to San Jose train. That's where I'm at. I'm on a Matthews, trade him to San Jose, train a team that's up and coming, one that he'd be willing to go to, and one that has some defensive assets they could give to the Maple Leafs, and also a second overall pick, which I would take in a minute for Matthews, and give it a fresh start. Maple Leaf organization does not want to go through a season without making the playoffs, but their short-sightedness on making the playoffs for one round, as opposed to going in one season and going in 2 or 3 rounds. Because if the Leafs, and I'm not saying they'll do this, but if the Leafs went in and went to the Eastern Final, that would mean 3 rounds. That's 3 years worth of playoff rounds for the Maple Leafs. So, what organization being in the position that the MLSC is in would not appreciate that? And that truthfully is the issue here. It's about success and what success is measured at. And success is not measured at making the playoffs in Toronto. Success, you and I both know, Aaron, it's measured in how deep they go in the playoffs.
No, 100%.
So that is what it is. Who are the best 5 coaches available, you think, for the Maple Leafs? What is your telling us?
Well, based on what I've seen out there and some of the articles I've read, in particular one by David Suggs in the Sporting News, he is talking about Bruce Cassidy. However, word has come down the pipe that Vegas has banned the Leafs from talking to Bruce Cassidy.
Can't talk.
So you can take him off the list. There's also David Carl, Denver University head coach. His name's been passed around quite a few times, mainly because he led the Denver Pioneers to the 2022, 2024, and 2026 national championships. At 36 years old, he's had plenty of time to take the leap to the NHL ranks. Another one would be a Canadian icon by the name of Patrick Roy. He first came to prominence in Montreal, then with the Islanders, and then they fired him, and that started this whole sort of cavalcade thing. But
I'm not sure
unlikely they'd actually take him, mainly because he hasn't had a lot of postseason success, right? Most of it has been
sure he's the dude.
So
I'm not sure he's the dude.
No, I don't think he's the guy at all. His name is out there, but I don't think he's the guy. Another name that has been bandied about is John Gruden, who's the current coach of the Toronto Marlies. They're currently about to start their 3rd round against the Cleveland Monsters, having dispatched of the Laval Rocket in 5 games. Now, he's a bit of an outsider compared to some of his counterparts. Under his tutelage, though, the Marlies has emerged as one of the AHL's better teams. He's a young head coach with a promising future. If Shaika & Co. want to go in-house with their next appointment, he'd be an ideal choice. So it's unclear if he'd have the same clout to convince Matthews to stay in Leaf colors for another year, as an outsider might have. The other thing that people want to keep in mind as well is how the last internal hire went for the Leafs when they brought in Sheldon Keefe to replace Michael Babcock a few seasons back, at the same time as elevating Kyle Dubas from the GM position with the Marlies to the general manager's position with the Leafs. So that's, there's some hesitancy I can see there over that sort of thing. The last of the coaches that might be a good fit for the Leafs would be Peter Laviolette. He's a known entity at the head coaching level, having led the Hurricanes to the 2006 Stanley Cup. Now, he hasn't been able to match that success as of late, although his teams like the Rangers, Capitals, and Predators have tended to compete for postseason berths and make deep playoff runs. He's not the kind to set off the fireworks in the Scotiabank Arena concourses, but at the same time, I think he's got a very solid and dependable kind of coaching style that could translate well for this team.
The Gruden thing is a little different than the previous. The difference between if he makes it up to the Maple Leafs, the National Hockey League team, is a little different than Keefe. Different in the sense that the Leafs are going to rely heavily on those players that are down there, not at the end of the season, not because of injuries, but because of the way they're going to start. They're going to need some of those young players to show they belong in the National Hockey League, because the Leafs have no choice. They have to walk away from some veterans because it's the same story I'm saying about Austin Matthews. Anything they can get for anyone that they have of any kind of value, they should go ahead and do it. And while you might look at it as a rebuild, I would still call it a retool. Because the team would be basically the same, except you take Matthews out of the equation. And then now you've got an opportunity to do some stuff. And I really think they need to bring in some young centers that are more responsible. And I would really love to see the Leafs get both the winger, number 1 overall, and the center available in Stenberg with the San Jose pick. And I think that would be a great combination, a talented winger and a responsible, center, which is what they need. And I think a responsible center will help make this team a little better. Of course, the experience in the first year will be something to work on, but I still think with Sundin involved, there's moves that they can make for some decent Swedish players that can be very successful here in Toronto. And if they lean on Swedish players, I don't think it'll be a bad deal. And they've got a guy who basically is promoting the idea of being a Maple Leaf as a member of the organization in Sundin.
No, I think that's a very positive take to have for it, and it gives a certain sort of optimism heading forward. So we'll have to see if this actually comes to pass.
Yeah, and are there Swedish players out there that would be assets that otherwise would not come to Toronto if it were not for Sundin? So, we know it's hard to get Canadian players coming here. And anybody who shakes their head and goes, "Oh, what are you talking about?" Listen, folks, the Marner situation is going to have an impact on how the Leafs can recruit. I'd even be worried about drafting their number 1 pick, the guy that everybody wants, how much he wants to be here, knowing, the way Marner left and stuff, right? So, they need some good news. And if you're going to bring Sundin in, the good news is there might be some Swedish players out there who are underperforming and will be undervalued that can come to Toronto, and if they're lucky, perform well or even overperform and create a good situation for Toronto next year. There's always room in the National Hockey League for a team that comes out of nowhere. Why not Toronto?
Yeah, they're as good of a choice as anybody to make a miracle comeback. So
absolutely. And the only way that's going to happen is with change. That I'm convinced about. And we had talked, and we'll repeat again over past conversations about trading a goaltender and getting something for the goaltender. There are ways for them to, help fill those empty cupboards of young, talented players. Speaking of a player that could cause that, a certain goaltender, a Russian goaltender for the Maple Leafs could help trigger that change that I'm referring to.
Oh, 100%. He's only 24, and we're talking about Artur Akhtiamov here. Where it was suggested he's a perfectionist, he has agreed. I think a lot of the expectations he has for himself are very often greater than the expectations the team has for him. After he was pulled in Game 4 of the second round against Laval, he was right back in to start Game 5 and promptly made 20 saves as the Marlies advanced with the 3-2 win. And they said, "Well, how do you find it within yourself to perform so well?" And he said, "Well, first of all, I hate myself." So one of those things that it's sort of like maybe sometimes I like that we win the 2 series and that's good. I have moments, but I need to work more because I want to stop more pucks.
Don't you hate it when you're your own worst critic?
Oh, always. But, for John Gruden, Akhtiamov's ability to find a balance between his self-hate and his desire to absolutely dominate is one of the reasons why the native of Kazan, Russia, has taken significant steps through the 25-26 season.
I'm not against him taking over.
He's gone from being a guy that was basically riding the pine now to a guy that's right up there with Hildeby when it comes to starting games for the Marlies. So. The good news is that he's back there along with Hildeby, and then there's Woll and Stolars, and there's a couple other guys. Ladislav Peska is still down there with them as well. It's generally not an area of concern. But the good news is because of the way that Akhtiamov's been playing in these playoffs, he's been kind of pushing Hildeby and at the same time pushing Woll and Stolars indirectly through his play with the Marlies. So.
Absolutely. Let's acknowledge some of the people that are watching. We've got Patrick. Is it GM Mafia? I think he's referring here to Matthews being next to go. He thinks also Riley must go, and we'll comment about these. Carl is a good coach. Who do you think he's referring to there? Carl?
Oh, the coach for Denver.
Oh, is that who it is?
We mentioned him in the previous article. Yeah. We mentioned him.
Is he available?
He could potentially be. Now, there's little evidence that we'd actually spurn the Mile High City for newer, greener pastures, but if he does, the Maple Leafs have to be considered one of the favorite spots for him to land. I mean, he's coached the U.S. World Junior team, and that's kind of spotlighted his gifts as a developer of young talent. And like I mentioned earlier, he's only 36, so it's not necessarily a bad choice.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got a guy here. Same guy. He thinks Matthews to San Jose is a good move.
I can't disagree with that.
Okay, well, if you're not going to be nice, we're not going to repeat what you're saying. So, the fact that you think I'm old, I mean, I can live with that. I mean, I know I'm old. I don't need your help to tell me I'm old. But if you think you're so bright, why don't you grab a microphone and join us? I've seen what happens when guys like that on on message, when they talk trash. 90% of them are incapable of carrying their own words, but that's just another story. All right, yeah. So it's good to hear from everybody who's watching. We appreciate your messages. So the Leafs, at the end of the day, the one comment that I gleaned from all these comments, and that is Maple Leaf fans are ready for a big move. Do you agree with them?
Yeah, I think we are. It's been too many years since 1967, and I would like to see us win more than 2 playoff rounds. It's long overdue, I think.
Well, we're at the point now where as a witness to Maple Leaf fans and their needs, we're at the point now where Maple Leaf fans are saying, let's make the playoffs next year is the bar they want to get over.
Well, I think the Leafs have successfully re-lowered the bar to hey, just make the playoffs after 9 years of making it and not making it in the 10th. That's a rather successful reset of the whole.
Well, yeah, well, you took the word out. That's one of the resets. Not the team has to make, but the fans that support them have to make. They're going to have to make the decision on what's the most important thing that the Leafs can do. I think the most important thing that I think, and this is fair to say, everybody who's watching and who cares about the Maple Leafs, we need to see something that says they're going back in the right direction, because all they've done the past little while, and really in a year, they went in the wrong direction, because, you can't say losing, and I know it's not a great thing to brag about, but losing in 7 to the team that won the Stanley Cup, that can't be that bad a thing. And the next year they didn't make the playoffs. So that's a lot of difference, losing to the Stanley Cup champion and not making the playoffs. There's a wide girth of improvement necessary based on that fact.
There's a massive chasm there between losing in 7 and not making the playoffs, especially when you drop 30 points during the regular season.
So the bar dropped drastically in 1 year. And the hope is that it rises again. And here's the good news for those out there who love ramming the Leafs and ramming the fact that didn't make the playoffs. If they had been in the division that Marner's in, they would have made the playoffs.
You know what the other really good thing is? If you get tired of watching the Leafs, there are 3 brand new PWHL teams that are coming in next year. You got one coming in Vegas, you got one coming in Detroit, and you have another coming in Hamilton, which is absolutely fantastic for them. And it's one of those things where, there's all of a sudden there's a plethora of hockey options. Not to mention a new AHL team going into the same arena that the Hamilton PWHL team is going to be playing in, and that the Toronto Rock play out of.
And we can talk about them before we leave before we hop off this time. The Rock are going to be playing in the final.
Yeah, they are. It's going to be starting this very shortly, actually. I'm unfortunately going to be missing it because I have prior commitments, but Friday they're playing against the Halifax Thunderbirds at TD Coliseum. Sunday will be game 2 back in Halifax at Scotiabank Center versus the Halifax Thunderbirds. And then, if necessary, game 3 will be the following weekend. So, all things considered, it's been a while since the Toronto Rock were in the finals. It's been a while since they've had a decent shot, and it's been a long time since this league has had a Canadian champion.
Absolutely.
So this time around practically guarantees it. Very happy to see that.
Well, we do have a problem with the Jays. They can't beat Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and they haven't been able to beat Tampa Bay for years. Not only here, but also down in Tampa. Taylor Walls put the Rays ahead with an RBI single in the 10th, and later scored on Jonathan Aranda's sac fly. And Tampa Bay held on to beat the Toronto Blue Jays 7-6 on Tuesday for its 16th win in 18 games. Walls drove in automatic runner Cedric Mullins with a high through a draw in infield with a hit. Through a draw in infield against Braden Trisher, made it 6-5. Aranda's fly ball to center gave the Rays a 2-run cushion that held up after Vladdy hit a sacrifice fly in the bottom half against Garrett Clevenger, who picked up his first save. Ian Seymour got 4 outs for the run. Ron Villard hit his second homer, and Mullins drove in a pair as the AL best Rays at 28-13 won their 6th straight series. Now, Toronto did erase a 5-0 deficit against a trio of Rays relievers in the 7th, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to actually wrap everything up. Dylan Cease is set to start against Griffin Jacks tonight, so that should be interesting. I'll be looking forward to catching that once we get done here.
Patrick wants Matthews to go to Chicago and New York. They might work for him as well. Whatever gets the Leafs the best amount of picks so that they can flush the past 10 years and get a legitimate first start, because that's really all I'm saying. It's not about the value of Matthews to the team or how good he is or how bad he is. That has no bearing. It's all about it's time to get a reset and restart, and that would be a way to go. Let's talk about F1. I know how much you love the F1.
So they had decided to make some engine changes based on how terrible everything had been at the start of this season here. After just 3 Grand Prix this season, they made curbs to the influence of electrical power. They answered driver criticism by promoting pure driving skill over electrical recharging, especially in qualifying. Basically, F1's used V6 engines with electrical hybrid power since 2014, and an increase in the amount of electrical power has forced drivers to adjust. Timing the electrical boost and recharging is the key to the tactical racing, but it's been so terrible that former champion Max Verstappen has basically said, if this keeps up, I'm going to quit. What they're doing for 2027 is they're trying to make the cars rely a little bit more on the internal combustion engine as opposed to the batteries, and that's going to make things hopefully a little bit more interesting.
Absolutely. Let's go to Canadian NHL hockey, and the Montreal Canadiens lost to the Sabres last night. Very disappointing there. The Sabres should have lost that game to Montreal if Montreal's power play could have been a little better. The 5-on-5 that Montreal has, while number 13 has been playing much better, unfortunately not better enough to put this team on his back and score a couple of goals that could end this game in their favor.
Yeah, they had a lot of open looks and a lot of chances to put the game away. Unfortunately, they couldn't. Caulfield did actually have to sit out a chunk of the third period after taking a cross-check to the throat off one of the face-offs. And believe it or not, the Zamboni door actually helped Buffalo win this one. Buffalo rang it in off the glass. It hit a portion of the Zamboni entrance door and sort of flipped into the net past Dobish. He wasn't expecting that at all. It was a bit of a shocker and a little bit deflating. But here's the thing. There was a 10-minute video review that didn't help everything either. The puck's getting a lot bouncier. I do apologize, an 11-minute.
I say that because it was 3-8 or 8-3 or whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was basically tough for them. Occasionally Juraj Slafkovsky manages to show flashes of brilliance, but unfortunately it didn't actually happen this time around. But even though they're trailing, they still have an opportunity to make sure that they can salt this away. So we'll have to see how everything pans out. We'll be looking forward to the next game.
There's a possibility that another Kachuk is going to leave Canada to play for an American team. This time it's Brady, the younger brother, and he's having a meeting with Steos. They're going to discuss things there. And what do you think they're going to talk about?
Well, he said that he's going to be sitting down with Steos in the next couple of days to hold exit meetings and look ahead to next year. They never going to know
how far those exit meetings are going. What kind of exit are you talking about?
It's a thing that the two of them, Steos and Kachuk, never got a chance to get together after the Senators were eliminated after getting swept by the Carolina Hurricanes, because less than 90 minutes after the game, Kachuk was on a flight back to New Jersey to be with his wife Emma for the birth of their second child. By the time Kachuk got back to Ottawa to speak with Travis Green in the media 3 days after the loss, Steos had already left for Slovakia to scout the IIHF Under-18 World Championships. So it's a case of them kind of missing each other on the way through. Hopefully they'll have the opportunity to catch up and sort of hash everything out. But it will be interesting to see if he ends up sticking with the team or if he ends up leaving. Absolutely.
Winnipeg's hunt for a center.
Yeah, so they were eyeing Charlie Coyle. Here's the thing: they've been looking for some center depth because it's an issue that they've had. That was one of their most pressing needs that they identified. Unfortunately, Charlie Coyle came off the market, agreeing to a 6-year extension with the Columbus Blue Jackets and a cap hit of $6 million per season. So that means that they're going to have to go back to the drawing board to try to find somebody. Unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of names associated with them for this. So it's going to be interesting to see who they end up actually coming out of silly season with. We'll have a better idea once July 1st hits.
And then we talked earlier about the coach being denied the discussion with the Oilers. Vegas says nope.
Yeah, they were the Oilers. There's been a lot of talk about the Oilers looking to get rid of Knobloch, but with Connor McDavid entering the final 2 years of his current contract, the Oilers were thinking if we could get Cassidy, we could possibly replicate the success that he had in Las Vegas. But because that door has now been closed, they're going to have to look elsewhere for it.
Yep, and I got to say that's strange that they would turn him down. Are they actually thinking of bringing him back? Is that why they're turning him down? Like thinking
that is the thinking. But,
right.
We don't have a lot more information on that. So
let's talk about the Canucks, and they've got their eye on somebody. How's that going?
Well, they currently have an eye on Ryan Johnson. As it currently stands, it looks like he's set to succeed Jim Rutherford as the Canucks hockey boss. Media reports from Rick Dollawall and Elliot Friedman and Canucks Army's Irfan Jafar have said that Johnson is set to take over. Several other sources have suggested the same to Post Media. All of this takes place following a search where Rutherford said he spoke with about 17 or 18 candidates, all of whom sounded reasonable, but clearly none stood out beyond the experienced and well-regarded Johnson, who's been with the Canucks in a variety of roles since 2013. He was initially hired as a development coach and was in the role until 2017, where he was promoted to director of player development and also named general manager of the Utica Comets in New York. He's been the team's AHL general manager ever since it was promoted in title the NHL club along the way. He was named a special assistant to the general manager in 2022, then promoted to assistant general manager in 2024. Rutherford said that Johnson's efforts and abilities were really one of the things that helped Abbotsford get where they did in winning the Calder Cup. Now, 4 years on from 2022, he looks set to take over from Rutherford and Patrick Alvin, who Rutherford dismissed at the end of last season. But we'll see if he's able to handle Aquilini, because that's another big question mark for the Canucks, is how much their owner likes to get involved in day-to-day things with the team.
There's a bit of that. It's been contentious at times as well.
Yeah.
Aaron, thanks for doing this, buddy.
Not a problem, Frank.
He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Sinishi. Thank you for watching Leaf Talk. We talk all about Canadian sports, whether it be teams that play in Canada or players that play around the world or take part in sports. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you again on Monday. Aaron can't be here on Friday. Enjoy the concert, buddy.
Thank you very much. Don't forget Victoria Day.
Victoria Day is coming.
Monday.